Welcome into the GigEm247 Sports Podcast, the SEC Media Days version of the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am joined by Carter Karels and Jimbo Fisher and players, McKinley Jackson, Fidel Diggs, and Ainias Smith were in Nashville on Monday to take part in the day, meet with the media, and Carter was on hand for all of it. Carter, how are you doing? How's the whole experience been?
It's great, man. I thought, maybe we should do some fun thing where we're out on Media Row or we have some background where I can record it. But it is so noisy down there. There are so many freaking people. Like, let me tell you, covering Florida State, SEC is way different than the ACC. There are so many people here. Like, literally every corner you turn, you're like, oh, I know that guy from TV, or I know that's a big athlete that I remember playing. There's just so many people here. Like, Nashville went all out for this event. The scheduling hasn't been great, but as far as the glitz and the glamour of it, it's been awesome.
Yeah, the schedule always seems to kind of change, right, and go back and forth. I dealt with that a little bit at the Texas High School Coaching Convention over the weekend as well, where ton of press conferences there too, and be sure to lock into the GigEm247 website, and I'll have a full breakdown of that coming later this week. But Jimbo Fisher was kind of the front and center on Monday, taking questions from the media and a couple in kind of a small group huddle up on the stage as well from more national media, some local media as well. And, a lot of eyeballs on him, a lot of kind of focus on what he was going to say, especially about Bobby Petrino. There was a lot of discussion about that. What'd you kind of see out of Jimbo Fisher today and take away from what he had to say?
Jimbo Fisher is just one of the most fascinating head coaches in college football. I mean, the highs, the lows, and whenever he talks, there's such a gravity in the room where everyone is just either waiting to hear him say something they don't like or something crazy. There's a lot of people that just don't like the guy, or they have a strong opinion on him. And so it's very interesting to watch the questions he gets, how he's asked questions, how he answers them. You never really know what you're going to get. He might be fiery. He may not answer things. Yeah. This time, the code he followed was pretty simple. I'm not going to say anything. That's pretty much what he did. He just didn't say anything the entire hour that he talked between the main room and the other room. And there's mixed emotions about that. Like, as a reporter, you're kind of like, oh man, I wish he said interesting things. But as a human being, it's like, okay, this guy's not obligated to say anything. Like, it's not like I can't sit here and be like, you need to answer it the way I want you to answer it. So I'm not one of those guys that watches coach speak and says, oh, I hate this guy. But you get a sense from a lot of other people that they're like that. And so overall, what I felt was the case was just a lot of deflecting, a lot of word salads as far as, hey, quarterback competition. It's close. Not really telling you much there. Okay, is it a pro style offense now, or is it spread, or what can we expect?
Love that question.
I'm not getting into that. And what about the 12th Man Plus Fund? What's your like, how are you guys approach that now? Oh, not really going to get into that. I mean, it was like almost every question was a non-answer. And again, it's like, okay, whatever. I mean, what really matters is not what you say at SEC Media Days on, what's the day, July 17th? That doesn't matter. What matters is, can you win on the football field? You can have the worst coach be the best talker ever, but if he's 3-9, no one gives a crap. So, what's going to ultimately matter is what happens this fall. I will say, though, when you sit there and not answer anything, if things do go wrong this season again, if it's not a good record, they don't win the games, that's where you kind of retrospectively look back and say, there might have been something to those non-answers. It would not look good in retrospect, and so only time will tell. Whether today really means anything. It's hard to look at it and just be mad at the guy. I mean, I don't care. As other people just go nuts. I mean, I'm looking at Twitter and people are like, "Oh, he's not saying who the play caller is." And I'm like, okay, but
doesn't matter.
In 8 other different interviews, he kind of said that Petrino's calling the plays. So,
right.
Just because he's being a little stubborn about answering it directly doesn't mean that, Petrino's not going to call the plays. So that's my long-winded answer of saying, this doesn't matter right now. It won't matter if he wins, but if he loses, that's where you kind of say, ooh, yeah, hindsight, that didn't look too great.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the point, right? It's all going to come down to what he does on the field this year. And I think he kind of recognizes that. And some of the interviews you saw him kind of talk about it. We're not going to make excuses. Is one of the things he said. Didn't get it done last year. There were injuries. There was a lack of execution, which ultimately falls on the coaching staff. And I think he recognized that. I think he underperformed. I think he also knows every answer he gets, or every answer he gives, like you said, is going to be microanalyzed with that little fine-tuned comb. And it goes for when he's asked questions about Bobby Petrino, play calling. One of the things, and this was brought up on the board, is, well, he continues to do it because people continue to ask about it. And that's a two-way street, right? Because if he had given an answer in the spring that said, listen, Bobby Petrino is the play caller, I'm going to hand things over to him and trust in everything he says, he wouldn't be getting the question over and over again at media days. But it's the fact that it's like, well, he talked about he's got great ideas and, we'll, see how it kind of plays out. That's kind of opens the door for reporters that are going to ask those sorts of questions to really dig into that and put him on the spot. And so it's kind of a two-way street, but I thought your tweet was kind of spot on that if they win in the fall, nobody's going to care. And people are going to understand that he wanted to keep things under wraps. He wanted to keep things secretive, but if they don't win, it's going to come back to, well, he was evasive in the press conference, and it's going to fuel that point. And I've heard a lot of people bring it up that, well, what if things are going sideways against Miami, right, in week 2? What happens then? That question is going to continue to linger.
Yeah.
Because if you don't give any answer, that sort of question is going to linger, even if you might not like it.
You're spot on in the sense of, there's a disconnect of, oh, he always gets asked about this, and so I would be mad too. It's like, dude, if the first press conference he went out and said, man, Bobby Petrino is awesome. He has such a great track record. He's good with this. He's good with that. Blah, blah, blah. Had he made Bobby Petrino available to speak to the media, and we learned a lot more about Bobby from Bobby, no one would be asking that many Bobby Petrino questions because we'd get all the answers that we'd want. But instead, it's this mystery man where it's like, is he actually calling the plays?
Yeah, what's going on? Yeah.
This doesn't have to be such a mystery. So, I'm between where I'm like, okay, it doesn't freaking matter in the grand scheme of things. Right. However, he's making things so unnecessarily difficult on himself. I know he doesn't care about the media and what's being said and all that.
He doesn't.
But doesn't that have an effect on perception? Perception has an effect on recruiting and things like that. So it's not like you can't not care about it at all. So I don't know. I've got mixed emotions about it, but again, I'm not really losing sleep over it like some folks. Yeah,
me neither. I kind of, chuckle because he does chuckle at some of the questions and he does kind of laugh. He's having fun with it. Jimbo Fisher is a guy that really enjoys a banter and having fun with it. And that's why in a room with Steve Adazio and Bobby Petrino, they may have disagreements. I don't think Jimbo Fisher is opposed to that. I think he welcomes that sort of kind of bold personalities and debates. He doesn't shy away from that. He enjoys those sorts of discussions, and he was asked about it during the press conference and kind of gave that answer that, you know what, like if we disagree, like that's fine. That's good.
Now, did you watch his interview with Feinbaum?
I a little bit of it. It did kind of have that.
I felt like it was an interrogation. It was like, I love Paul, man. Like I don't want to sound like I'm hating him, and I get why.
That's his interviewing style.
Felt the way he felt. It's his style, but it's also like when someone's kind of feeding you crap a little bit, you gotta kind of challenge and say, okay, like really though, you know, and so it was really interesting, like to see these national media time people on the outside. Like I think A&M reporters, we're conditioned to it because we see it every day, we see it all the time. Yeah. But national reporters, you know, they interview Brian Kelly and he's talking about his injury report extensively and all these other things, and they interview Jimbo and they're like, this guy won't even tell me that Connor Wigman's the starter. Like, what are you talking? Yeah. Like, what? And you know, it's very funny. And again, it's whatever. I mean, it was an adjustment for me coming from Florida State, where they let us talk to every single player on the team. They let us talk to every coach, every support staffer. If we wanted to interview the athletic director, we could like call them that like in 1 second and get them every single time. Like it was so wide open. And here it's like very, very restrictive, one of the more restrictive in the country. And it's okay. That's fine as long as you win football games. If you don't, that's where things get dicey. You can't control the narrative. You can't, you know, you can't really explain yourself as well if you're being closed off. So I felt like coming off a 5-7 season, it's the wrong move for Jimbo. A lot of times you'll see coaches in college football, when they lose, they warm up to the media because they want the favorable coverage and things of that nature. And again, I don't think media should say, oh, this guy gives me access, so I love him, or, oh, he doesn't give me access, so I hate him. Right. But it does help you, or it can only help you if you make it easier for the folks covering you. And so you kind of see that happen sometimes with these grouchy media types that watch them and they're just like, dude, what the heck?
Yeah. So I think one of the more positive notes that he did talk about, and I wholeheartedly agree with him on this front, is when he talked about recruiting and how the players, he talked about the culture a little bit and how that's a sign that the culture is where it needs to be. And I'm glad he touched on it, because it was something when we caught up with a lot of visitors in June, they talked about, man, Edrin Cooper and, you know, some of the other guys, Reuben Fothery, Layden Robinson was a guy that was mentioned as well. These guys who really helped during official visit weekends talk about the program in a positive light, and it does play a big role, and it's one of the reasons that they now have a top 10 recruiting class. And so I thought that was one of the really, you know, kind of positive notes from a recruiting front that he talked about is the impact that players can have on recruitments and that. So that was certainly, I think, one of his stronger points of the day, and something that, you know, it's going well right now. They've got a lot of good momentum and momentum that they can carry into the latter portion of July. You know, with the pool party coming up, they've got a lot of big names they're in the mix for, fighting to get on campus, you know, battling LSU, Texas, Oklahoma, all these guys to get them on the final week. So thought that was really positive. We're going to touch on another nice note after the break. I thought you had a really fun story with Ainias Smith on, well, obviously a topic we had a chance to talk with Elijah Robinson as well when he was at the Texas High School Football Coaches Convention. So stick with us, and we'll be right back after a quick break. Welcome back into the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Carter Karels. Carter, I thought you had a really good story on the site this morning as you kind of touched down in Nashville. You got a chance to speak to Ainias Smith and his family, who are really looking to honor Terry Price. Just walk me through the story, how you kind of came about it, and what that conversation was like.
Yeah, I had a chance last night to talk with Ainias Smith's parents, Samira and Maurice Sr. And gosh, those two are awesome. They really that whole family is just like the perfect family you'd want in a football program. And I I get really into these lengthy conversations with people sometimes where I'll be interviewing someone and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've been talking to you for an hour. We talked for maybe 2.5, 3 hours last night. Like, that's how long we were talking. Now, we talked about mostly for a story I'm doing on Ainias Smith that really looking forward to our readers checking out. A lot of old untold stories and stuff about his injury. But as far as the Terry Price one, there was a lot of compelling stuff that his mom told me about Ainias as far as what Terry Price meant to him. That Ainias basically went to the funeral July 8th, July 9th, and was so touched by it that I think when he got back in his car and drove back home in Houston, he was talking to his mom about it the whole ride back. And then when he got home, he stayed in his car until 2 a.m. because he was just so deep in thought about Terry Price. And one of the things that was said about Terry that really stuck out to him, if you know anything about Ainias, he loves suits. He wears them all the time. He has an entire closet dedicated to suits, which maybe I need to kind of emulate that because I don't really have any. So, but I don't like dressing nice. But anyway, at the funeral, there was a story told that Terry Price showed up on his official visit in a suit. And people were like, who would do that? And I think Ainias is kind of thinking, I might, you know?
Yeah.
And Ainias, despite being a receiver, despite being on the other side of the ball, different position, had a great relationship with Terry. And so when he got back to his house, talked with his mom, said, we got to do something. They thought about, do we do a helmet decal? Well, school probably wouldn't let us. Like that would have to be approved by the conference and all that. Yeah. How about we do a cuff link? And it's like, no, not a cuff link because, you're
not going to see it that well.
Teenage boys don't even know what a cuff link is. I don't even know what it is, So anyway, they finally decided lapel pins. For this whole time I've been mispronouncing it. Did I get it right? Lapel?
I think so.
Lapel pins. And it is basically, obviously you put it on your vest or your suit, and it's got Terry Price's initials, TP, which was, also his nickname. And it's made of these really nice looking, like they almost look like crystals, I guess. And really has a great look to it. And not cheap, but Ainias got them from this guy. I think he's based in Detroit. And the plan is to give one to every coach and give one to every teammate. And so when they do it's called the Spirit Walk at A&M. I should probably know, but it's at the Spirit Walk. When they walk into the stadium, when they're all wearing suits and whatnot, the plan is for everyone to be wearing those lapel pins. So I think they're going to get some for the Price family as well and make it a whole big deal. My hope is that it catches wildfire and maybe it's something the fan base can get a hold of. I don't know, but regardless, it's such a touching thing for a guy who's not on the side of the ball, not on his position, to do this for him, it just shows you kind of the heart that this kid has. And once you read this feature, I mean, you'll learn a lot more about what this kid is like off the field. And, you know, it really came close to not coming back for a 5th season here. And A&M should feel very lucky that he did, because he is no doubt one of the biggest leaders on the team. And this was just kind of another example of something that they need. You know, they needed a guy like that last year. Not having him was that crushed them. It crushed him, and it crushed him too, to not be there for him. And, you know, hear all the stories about last year. I mean, I can't share all of them, but like the knuckleheads that were in that locker room, dude, like there was some kids on the team that were awful. Like, I'm not going to mince words there, because some of the things I've heard, it's like, I can't even believe this wasn't reported, because this is like the craziest thing I've ever heard. But to be in that locker room where you have no control over this, you know, you don't, your words don't feel like they matter because you're not playing, you're not part of it, right? Well, now that he's healthy and now that he's back and now that a lot of those bad eggs are gone, I think you're going to start seeing him make that impact that he should have made last year for the full year. So, again, another long-winded thing, but this is a great player to have on this team, and what a cool thing for this team to be able to have this season.
No doubt. I think it also speaks to, you know, just the impact that Coach Price, and we've talked about it on previous podcasts, the impact that he had on anybody that he was around in the program, players, support staff, coaches, family members, recruits, fans, anybody that Terry Price was around seems to have a story about, you know, how they were impacted and how they were touched. And Elijah Robinson, who obviously grew extremely close to Terry Price, was at the Texas High School Coaches Convention, and he was asked about it as well. And it's the first opportunity for him to really open up about what Terry Price kind of meant for him. And obviously when it comes to, and Jimbo Fisher talked about this too, they'll have news on a replacement of what they're going to do next at the end of the month. He talked about doing that close to fall camp. And, you know, obviously Elijah Robinson was going to defer all those questions to Jimbo Fisher. But when it came to Terry Price, he said, you know, that Terry Price really helped with his transition to Texas A&M and helped him and his family get up to speed, mentor him. And he looks up to Terry Price, called him a dear friend, and, you know, was really heartfelt in what Terry Price has meant to him, and was also asked, like, does there need to be a meeting or a message or any sort of rallying cry around the rest of the team? And said, I don't think that's necessary. That's not really something the coaches even have to do, because these players, and Ainias Smith doing this is a good example of it, is these players have a chip on their shoulder anyway. They want to go out and honor Terry Price in the best way that they possibly can. And so there doesn't need to be a grand message or a meeting with the coaching staff about where they talk about honoring Terry Price. I think it's already inside all the players to, you know, honor him the best way they can this fall, go out and put in a little extra motivation in there. And so, you know, some really cool stories coming around SEC Media Days. I think obviously Terry Price and Jimbo Fisher spoke about the person as well, and you know, talked about him just being a great Aggie and being a great role model for everybody, and the impact that he had. So Terry Price is his presence was certainly felt around SEC Media Days. You knew it probably would be, and you know, to hear a lot of stories about him was certainly touching. So we're gonna have a lot more from SEC Media Days coming up on the site over the course of the week. A lot of breakdowns, a lot of takeaways. And so encourage you guys to head over there, and be sure to like and share this video if you enjoyed it, and to get notifications every time a new video happens. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to the podcast as well, to get a notification every time a new video drops. Just hit that little subscribe button, and you'll be all squared away. So to everyone, thanks again for listening, and enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you guys soon.